Any epoch will exhibit a dominant aesthetic or stylistic culture. And design history as a discipline uses style and the form of things as a way of investigating culture. The idea that a thing expresses something more than itself.
From the post-war modern style to the diversity of the new millennium, explore 6 decades of Canadian design.
The reason why design is important in Canada is because it is what defines us as a culture. It also defines us in our everyday world.
Delve into the collection of the Design Exchange, Canada's National Design Museum, to uncover the exceptional stories behind the objects of everyday life. These are the symbols of our cultural past and present. It's impossible to think of the first decade of the 2000s without also thinking of the significance of a new millennium. This mystifying era was defined by a sense of optimism and angst brought on by the anticipation of a new century. The turn of the century was ushered in with the fear of the Y2K bug and the potential for a full-scale meltdown. In an age so deeply affected by digital technology, it's perhaps appropriate that this period started out this way. Fears quickly dwindled when crisis turned out to be a non-starter, and everything pretty much went on as usual. But the 2000s were anything but dull. Faith in technology continued to reign, and the proliferation of the internet propelled globalism to new levels. A concern with the environment became one of the most pervasive themes of the 2000s. The Kyoto Protocol, aimed at fighting global warming, came into full force in 2005. Sustainability was seen by some as a trend and by others as a necessity, but either way, it seemed that everyone was going green. In the world of design, this was also the case. Large, medium, and small-size producers were taking on the challenge of environmentalism. But beyond that, the various visual languages designers were using expanded, ranging from the persistent global aesthetic to more specific regional approaches. Ultimately, the significance of the 2000s is yet to be fully understood. But what can be stated with certainty is that this was an era of diversity, contemplation, and complexity. Design by Decade takes a look at the Canadian design landscape from the turn of the new century until today, examining the wide array of design practices that make Canada unique.
Well, I think there was such optimism with the idea of a new millennium and the possibilities of another 1,000 years of whatever, or just the fact that an old century was passing away. One thinks about any number of prognostications about what this new millennium would be.
I think that's an interesting thing.
This one piece will make 52 layers.
Watch on mobile devices or the big screen. All for free. No subscription required.
So it was the unknown, exciting new century. Everything was going swimmingly well. The economy was booming. It was the dot-com era, and I think we all went into a cultural shock with 9/11. There's no question that was a dramatic change and reshifting, a paradigm shift, if you will, with our culture.
The reality of 9/11 caused any number of people to reflect on what happened, to rethink their lives, to rethink the implications of capitalism, power, imperialism, nation states, people within a nation, people outside of a nation. If those anxieties or concerns were manifest in design, made visible, I think it was subtle. I think rather than overt, direct visual reference to what happened in 9/11, there was a type of examining about the purposefulness of design. Design for humanity, design that helps the environment, design that satisfies human need.
The biggest influence on design in the 2000s is sustainability. All of a sudden, we see the youth movement of being environmentally friendly affecting the entire world. Sustainability can mean many different things, and there's many different levels of being sustainable. A small firm who focuses on small batch production may primarily be about using regional materials. And then in the very large companies, we see that they may embrace the production and the distribution ideas, but also large companies are beginning to educate their clients about sustainability. And this is a very important idea for them to differentiate themselves in the marketplace and stay competitive.
It would be impossible to describe the diversity of design culture in Canada after 2000. Stylistically and culturally, I think we can see that there was a return to modernism, the tenets of a type of industrial and capitalist progress. Even though there was lots of stylistic variation, there is a type of coherence around a return to that heyday of design that was the 1950s.
We still had the blob look. Karen Rashid, who was a champion of this aesthetic in North America, was very much at the top of his game.
There's a commercial logic to what we might call a global aesthetic. Accordingly, design companies of a large order in Canada produce office systems and seating and task objects that will have commercial appeal around the world. An example of one of Canada's great international design success stories would be that of Technion.
Technion is one of Canada's largest manufacturers of systems furniture. Embracing a minimal, universal aesthetic, Technion places great value on good design as well as sustainability. Targeting Fortune 500 clients, their market is both domestic and international.
It's difficult to define the Technion look in terms of design because it spans many different aspects of design. It would be possibly described as mid-century modern, could be described as European in look and feel. It's critical for us to try to achieve a universal look to our products that still have a sensitivity towards regional and geographic preferences.
The NAMI chair is one of Technion's great success stories. It takes its cues from European styling. It's a stackable plastic chair that is clean in its configuration, and it's malleable. You can sit in it and the back will rock back and forth, but it supports you with great comfort. NAMI means cresting wave, and in profile the chair does sort of evoke the seaside. I think aesthetically or stylistically, the NAMI chair represents that tenet within design culture of seeking a type of universal or global look.
Outpost is a fine example of a product that was designed with sustainability in mind. The main element of Outpost is the structural column, which goes from floor to ceiling height. It's a multi-use product. It serves many functions. It has a minimum number of components. It doesn't require the support of walls. It helps to define a space architecturally. Also supports a work surface. It incorporates the housing for power and data and communications. It can also be used as signage, also as lighting within a space to be indirect or direct. One of our longest selling products, the TOS office system, has a life cycle of 15 years.
In the 2000s, Technion embarked on a project called Refresh TOS. Clients can reuse the TOS frame and structure while upgrading and refining specific design elements. This is just one of Technion's sustainable development initiatives.
Some of the ways that we address sustainability within our design and our products is first and foremost to use products that are recyclable and reusable. Number two, we try to use products that are natural in their composition. We try to minimize the number of components that are used within these products, and we design them in such a way that they are easily disassembled for reusability.
Technion is an exciting example of successful large-scale production in Canada. Employing specific design and manufacture techniques, the company strives to balance green initiatives with fiscal growth. The current design climate in Canada is broad, both in terms of aesthetic trends and in terms of design practice. At the beginning of the 21st century, there was a tendency toward minimalism. But as the 2000s progressed, designers in Canada and abroad were going back to a more ornamental style.
Early into the new millennium, there was a reaction to sensual minimalism. We were kind of tired of this ubiquitous aesthetic. So I think in reaction to that, it was this understanding and this importance now that what's wrong with local design, what's wrong with local imagery. There were two concurrent styles that were happening, and they both embraced ornament. One looked more to nature and to flora and fauna in particular for imagery, and the other looked at traditional art movements from the past.
In Canada, objects are being made at a large scale, such as the crisp, clean designs of Technion, but also at a very small scale. Small batch production has played a very important role in Canadian design for many years. Objects that are made in small amounts can often be the most compelling. Many of these pieces carry a regional narrative and confront the idea of Canadian identity. Canada's small batch production culture is thriving.
The question of why is anything significant is never an easy one to answer. I certainly recognize the importance of Canadian industrial production, firms like Technion, Palliser, and others. But as a historian, I'm interested in small batch productions because I think they reveal something more telling about society. In the context of Canada, it is the small batch production model that seems to hold the richest future, in the sense that regionalism can be acknowledged with people making things on a small scale. Tastes that differ from parts of the country to other parts of the country can be honored. And because of the economies of scale embedded in small batch production, you can have designer artisans and designer makers doing things that honor themselves.
Made is a Toronto-based design retailer that also acts as a showroom for contemporary Canadian design. Their mandate is to only present objects designed by Canadians. And in fact, 99% of these are made in Canada as well. The bold owners, Sean Moore and Julie Nicholson, carry a range of unique objects that represent the flourishing small-scale production realm of Canadian design today.
Made is both a store and a gallery, a place of culture and a place of consumption. Andy Warhol said that at one point in time all department stores would be museums and all museums would be department stores. It's sort of a telling point. And even though Warhol was suggesting it rather cynically about the nature of capitalism and the collision of culture and consumption, in Made, it works beautifully.
Within the showroom, we show a huge variety of items, everything from small giftware pieces like ceramics to textile items, toss cushions and blankets, up to larger furniture pieces like shelving units, cabinets, and upholstery.
I think designers who work in small batch production really focus on the idea of sustainability. It's dear to their hearts. They have to consider very carefully if they waste anything. They don't want to do that. Nature is a huge part of the ideas and the inspiration that's coming to a lot of designers nowadays. It's definitely in the Canadian psyche as, from cottage days, visiting parts of Canada that they retain an affection for.
Some of the symbols from nature that you'd see in the work that we're carrying would be things like bird imagery, things related to trees, so stumps, branches, cones.
I think the narrative in work is something that will continue, and it's also helping the sort of burgeoning idea of Canadian design having an identity, that people are more likely to be self-referential and speaking to things about a common past.
Small batch design in Canada seems, pretty characteristically, to evoke Canada as a place. As such, I think that this motif in Canadian design that unites these divergent and different designers is about a reverence for Canada and a respect for the natural world that makes up this country.
A fascinating case study of small batch and custom-made production is the work of the brothers Dressler. The twin duo has received a lot of attention for their objects, which they both design and produce in their Toronto workshop. The brothers Dressler work mainly with wood and salvaged objects, and their process involves local craftsmanship.
The brothers Dressler epitomize small batch production that is sensitive to materials and that manages in their design aesthetic to evoke nature in thoughtful and original ways. We carry a number of the brothers Dressler pieces, and we also carry out a lot of custom building with them. They fit very well into the sort of spirit of what we have at Made. A customer's immediate response to the brothers Dressler work is about the warmth of their materials, that they love the sort of textural choices in the woods that they use. They love that they let the grains and the natural essence of the pieces speak for itself.
Our work is primarily in wood, a lot of Douglas fir that's come out of old buildings. There's also fallen trees that have been knocked down by storms and whatnot. We look for suppliers who have access to those. Other items that we've come across are like automotive parts, metal and salvaged objects, found materials. We have these objects and then we try to think of how we can make them into an interesting piece.
When it comes to thinking about a design and starting off a design, both of us will sit down and brainstorm ideas, so we really start the design process together. The fact that we share the same DNA means that we have similar aesthetics and similar ideas in the way things should come together. The Branches Chandelier was a project that we were commissioned by Swarovski to create something utilizing Swarovski crystals. We came up with the concept of utilizing a branch system similar to anything we find in nature, whether it's tributaries for rivers or it's branching of actual trees or the veins in our bodies.
There's only two different elements that make it up, but by putting them in different positions and adding them in different places, these simple elements create something quite complex. Every single branch that we put onto it is unique. They're all based on the same sort of growth pattern, but they actually are, everyone is unique in shape. The main way that it is made is through steam bending, and the steam bending is a process where we take a piece of wood and we put it in a box and steam it for a certain amount of time, and then it becomes sort of flexible. It's also part of the process with the steam bending. Because of the knots and stuff, we sometimes end up with bends that aren't necessarily
consistent.
They're not consistent, and there's kind of a wonkiness to them, but these are actually the more interesting pieces, and it adds a little more character into the piece in the end.
I think when looking at the idea of sustainability in our work, it's just a natural part of our process and the way that we look at in building anything. So it's not a matter that we are aiming just to have something and say that, well, this was built sustainably. It's more like there's no choice in the matter. It has to be built sustainably.
We're not just building things for the sake of building. We're building things to give to people to last a long time and to be able to enjoy for a very long time.
The brothers Dressler's approach to sustainability is a remarkable example of small-scale production in Canada. They successfully use repurposed materials to create long-lasting pieces that hold an important place in current Canadian design practice. Design companies of all shapes and sizes make up the current Canadian design landscape, from sleek minimal objects destined for international markets to one-of-a-kind handmade pieces sold locally. Canada's contribution to the world of design is as strong as ever. Designers and manufacturers across the nation are approaching the problem of sustainability from different angles. Larger companies are often looking to use recycled materials or materials that are biodegradable. They strive to maintain eco-friendly manufacturing processes. Smaller firms often have inherently green practices, repurposing objects and materials to create pieces meant to last a lifetime. Beyond the consistent inclination towards sustainability, another shift that has developed quickly during the 2000s is the collapse of disciplines. The role of a designer is less defined than it once was. The rigidly defined roles of the past have given way to greater freedom for designers to work across disciplines and media. It's no surprise, therefore, that branding, packaging, and various other aspects of the industry have become of great concern to many designers.
There are several significant Canadian designers whose design practices and the modes used to manufacture their ideas come to mind. One would be Patrick Messier out of Montreal. An engineer by training, his work is thoughtful and highly designed and highly engineered. He has expansive design aesthetic. He can design things that look somewhat traditional, outdoor seating for urban Montreal, to objects that are part of that global aesthetic where the origin of their conception is in no way revealed in their materiality. Patrick Messier is a designer, although formally trained in a particular type of expertise, has an aesthetic and design sensibility that allows him, for example, to design the brands and the advertising for a product that he's also produced. This capacity to move between expertise might be better understood as a type of mastery, an overarching capacity to see and realize thoughtful and appropriate shapes, forms, and products.
What makes good design is first having a strategy, making a good market study, getting the maximum information to get the insights. The old mentality is to create a product and put a brand over it, and now what we do is the product is the brand. So it's a different way of thinking. The Kingsley bench is an high-end street furniture line that we have created for Cascades. Cascades makes planks out of recycled plastics. What is unique about this object? It's its sensuality. I would say the comfort you have with it. It's a complete product. So everything was taken into account when creating the product. The Kingsley bench was acquired by the Musée National des Beaux-Arts du Québec as an important object in the Quebec design. Emotions are one of the most important means of communication for a product. So the Mama rocking chair is about emotional experience.
Rocking chairs occupy important places in conceptions of the home and ideas of domesticity. A rocking chair by the hearth, a place of maternal comfort, an old form that makes people pleased when they think about a rocking chair. He had the image in his mind of clothes being hung on a line, and the chair looks like a white sheet, crisp and fresh smelling, being blown in the wind. So if you imagine a sheet that can be blown, put into the form of a rocking chair that works, made in a single cast piece of fiberglass in this glistening, blinding, snow-like white, you get an object that is both functional and highly aesthetic. It's a piece of usable sculpture.
Patrick Messier's designs are both thoughtful and poignant. Like many others in his field, his work is an example of a multidisciplinary approach. Design in Canada in the 21st century is indeed multifaceted. From large manufacturers targeting international markets to smaller craft-based producers, Canada's design industry plays an important role globally and continues to captivate buyers both near and far.